On October 6, 2022, the Twitter account for the House Judiciary GOP tweeted the following words: Kanye, Elon, Trump. This tweet was celebratory in nature. Kanye West, or Ye as he goes by, had recently delighted conservatives by wearing a White Lives Matter t-shirt to a fashion show. Elon Musk had committed to buying Twitter and reducing content moderation. Donald Trump was leading the Republican Party towards a midterm election that almost all analysts predicted would see big wins for the Republicans. The tweet was deleted less than 2 months later, after the first of the trio, Ye, rapidly self-immolated and became too crazy for even Alex Jones. Nothing quite so spectacular has happened with Trump or Elon, but they still have many similarities. They're all aligned with the political right, rich, controversial, own social media companies, well, Ye tried, and of course, in the year 2022, they all stumbled because they made the exact same mistake. The mistake of believing too much in history. Donald Trump stepped heavily into the 2022 midterms, making hundreds of endorsements in Republican primaries. Due to his then unparalleled standing within the party, those he endorsed tended to win. A lot. The hand of Trump can most heavily be seen in the victories of two key Senate candidates, Mehmet Oz, an acclaimed heart surgeon who achieved fame hosting the Dr. Oz show, and Herschel Walker, a well-known football star. Prior to Trump's endorsement, David McCormick had led the Pennsylvania Senate primary. However, immediately after Trump endorsed Oz, Oz began to consistently take the lead in polling, something that would ultimately culminate in him narrowly winning the primary. Similarly, Trump pushed Walker to run, and his early support of Walker nipped any potential rivals in the bud, paving the way for an easy primary victory. The deck was heavily stacked in favor of both candidates. High inflation, high crime rates, and President Biden's flagging poll numbers gave Republicans an advantage. Historical trends also favored Republicans, as the party in charge tends to lose midterm elections pretty badly. Finally, there were major advantages within the individual states. Oz's opponent, John Fetterman, suffered a stroke that took him out of commission for months and raised doubts about his mental competence. Georgia is a Republican-leading state, as reflected by its Republican governor, Republican lieutenant governor, Republican secretary of state, Republican attorney general, 9 of the 14 House seats being held by Republicans, Republican-controlled state Senate, and Republican-controlled state House. They both lost. Winning those 2 seats would have allowed the Republicans to take the Senate in 2022, and they lost. And they lost because they were pretty terrible candidates. Mehmet Oz had major vulnerabilities that were exploited by Fetterman. For starters, he didn't live in Pennsylvania, something for which he was widely ridiculed. Oz also came under fire for supporting dubious medical products for years on his show. Oz's past liberal views on issues such as abortion and gun control led to accusations of him not being a true conservative, something that led to difficulty consolidating support behind him. Finally, Oz's image of being a polished, wealthy TV doctor made him seem out of touch, and contrasted with the more rugged image Fetterman projected, something that likely played a role in Fetterman's surprisingly strong performance in rural areas. Herschel Walker spent his entire campaign endlessly dealing with accusations related to his past. He was dogged with accusations of domestic violence. His own son, Christian Walker, accused him of threatening his family members and chasing them across the country. 2 separate women accused him of pressuring them to get abortions, something that didn't gel with his harsh pro-life positions. This relentless flow of scandals dragged what should have been a layup campaign into the dirt. Trump undoubtedly knew about all, or at least some of these problems before deciding who to endorse. The concerns about Oz being from out of state and not being conservative enough came up frequently in his primary, long before Trump endorsed him. Trump was also literally friends with Walker for decades, so there's simply no way he didn't know about his history. But Trump endorsed them anyways, forgoing safer picks in favor of candidates dogged with problems. Why? 6 years before the 2022 midterms, Donald Trump pulled off a stunning upset by winning the presidential election. Many found it extremely surreal that Trump, who had previously been a mid-tier TV personality, had become the president. However, his status as a celebrity likely played a major role in his victory. As a celebrity, Trump was a political outsider. This led to many voters who were disillusioned with career politicians, a lot of people, backing him. In addition, his experience as a celebrity made him understand the importance of the spotlight. He put this lesson to use by constantly making inflammatory comments that drew tons of media coverage, effectively giving him billions of dollars of free advertising. In light of all of this, perhaps it's no surprise that he chose to support 2 celebrities in spite of their flaws. After all, he himself was a deeply flawed celebrity candidate who still managed to win. Donald Trump trusted so much that the celebrity factor that enabled him to win would enable his Senate candidates to win, that he ignored everything else. And that's how the Republican Party failed to take the Senate. On April 14, 2022, Elon Musk offered to buy Twitter at $54.20 a share, which totaled at $44 billion for the whole company. This was significantly more than Twitter's then market price, and much, much more than Twitter's actual value of negative $60 billion. Twitter's board initially resisted, but eventually acquiesced and agreed to the deal on April 25th. The jury is still out on what the final outcome of Musk's tenure at Twitter will be, since the site hasn't totally crumbled to dust. However, there is one thing that we do know for sure, and that is that buying Twitter was a mistake. And don't take it from me, take it from Elon Musk. Almost immediately after agreeing to buy Twitter, he began to get cold feet, first saying that he was putting the deal on hold, before demanding more and more information on Twitter, and eventually trying to pull out of the deal altogether in July. The only reason he owns Twitter today is because Twitter sued to get him to go along with the deal. Legal experts are pretty sure that Musk didn't actually have a hope of pulling out, so it came as no surprise when, right before the case was due to come to trial, he agreed to buy Twitter. Considering how rapidly he changed his mind, it seems most likely that he bought Twitter very impulsively, and then regretted it and tried to wiggle his way out of buying it. This, of course, begs the question, how do you impulsively spend $44 billion? You know, most people can splurge a lot of money on a whim, but not anywhere close to $44 billion. How could this happen? Well, what if I told you there was another story that involved Elon Musk, Twitter, taking a publicly traded company private, a lawsuit, and even the number 420 in the specific context of stock prices? That would be crazy, wouldn't it? Surely there couldn't be another story that shares so many elements in Elon Musk's life. It's inconceivable, ridiculous. I can't... 3 years, 8 months, and 8 days before his acquisition of Twitter, Elon Musk tweeted that he had secured funding to take Tesla private at $420 per share. This was substantially higher than Tesla's then share price, so it triggered an immediate jump in stock value. There was just one problem. He had not, in fact, secured funding for such an acquisition. Normally, when someone puts out incorrect information on Twitter, it's not a big deal. Water's wet, the sky's blue, don't trust social media. However, Musk just so happened to be the CEO and chairman of Tesla, which slightly raised the stakes. Raised the stakes so much that the SEC, a government entity in charge of protecting shareholders and enforcing federal securities law, sued him for fraud. Ultimately, the SEC let him off light, settling out of court. Musk paid them $40 million, a tiny fraction of his then $20+ billion fortune, and agreed to minor changes in Tesla that did very little to diminish his influence there. So perhaps the reason that Musk thought he could get away with making an extravagant offer to Twitter that he didn't really want to pay is that he got away with making an extravagant offer to buy Tesla that he couldn't pay. Of course, this isn't the only time that Musk has run afoul with regulators, but the result always tends to be the same. He wins. And if you keep getting into legal trouble with regulators and private citizens, and you either win or face no major consequences, you're not going to be afraid of getting into legal trouble with Twitter. So this causes me to think that these past events are connected to his reckless acquisition of Twitter. His past experiences made him too confident in his ability to wiggle out of any legal jam that might occur if he tried to back out, and he acted recklessly. He went too far down the road of acquiring Twitter for any amount of lawyers to let him back out, and as his ways out closed and the reality of his legal situation set in, he was forced to buy Twitter. Lastly, we arrive at Ye. This is the one case for which my reasoning is the most tenuous. This is because Ye has unmedicated bipolar disorder, which means that there is some ambiguity about how much of his actions are happening because of rational decision-making and how much of them are happening because of his disorder. I personally believe that his actions are somewhat influenced by both, but I can understand if someone might disagree with me. Anyways, Ye went through a rapid downward spiral in late 2022. He made countless anti-Semitic remarks that rapidly ramped up in intensity, becoming too extreme for even the fringes of the fringe of the American political spectrum. Ye's actions unsurprisingly drew swift condemnation from pretty much everyone. Among those who have denounced Ye are some of the brands that he partnered with, most notably Adidas and Balenciaga. They have both cut ties with Ye, and other brands seem unwilling to partner with him due to his toxicity. Most of Ye's net worth was locked up in those brand deals, so this cutting of ties led to his estimated net worth falling from $2 billion to $400 million. I fully believe that Ye, in his heart of hearts, is an anti-Semite. However, normally when public figures express bigoted views, they try to apologize and half-heartedly say they've changed because they recognize the negative social consequences they might face for those views. In contrast, Ye continually doubled down on his anti-Semitism. So, the $1.6 billion question is why? Why do all of this? Why continually dig an ever deeper hole instead of retreating and salvaging whatever you have left? Again, I must reiterate that bipolar disorder is almost certainly part of the reason for this. But I feel that there is also a rational explanation that plays a role in Ye's decision. This explanation lies in the interminable controversy maelstrom that is Ye's career. It is 2005. Ye does something controversial. During a charity broadcast, he claims that George W. Bush doesn't care about black people, based on the Bush administration's lackluster reaction to Hurricane Katrina. It is 2009. Ye does something controversial. During the VMAs, he drunkenly rushes the stage and interrupts Taylor Swift's speech to talk about Beyonce. It is 2013. Ye does something controversial. He wears a Confederate flag patch. It is 2016. Ye does something controversial. He makes a music video featuring naked mannequins of many fellow musicians, including Taylor Swift. It is 2016. Ye does something controversial. He declares his support for Donald Trump. It is 2018. Ye does something controversial. He describes slavery as a choice. It is 2020. Ye does something controversial. He announces his presidential run in a chaotic speech he makes wearing a bulletproof vest. He attacks Harriet Tubman and then has an emotional breakdown over how he almost aborted his daughter. He spends $12.4 million on the campaign to net 60,000 votes. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure that Ye lost fans over the course of all this. But do you know what happens when a plethora of news articles are written about someone doing something? Their fame increases. People know them. The lifeblood of any celebrity is recognition. And Ye's never-ending hijinks bombarded him with recognition. This is something that is reflected in his net worth, which continually rose throughout this storm of controversies. So is it a surprise that when Ye finds himself in hot water, he refuses to back down and just adds fuel to the fire? After all, every other previous controversy had ended with him emerging unscathed and growing his notoriety. But of course, this time, he went too far. Many of the fans and corporations that had stuck with him for so long finally had enough, and he paid a devastating price that he had never paid before. There's a saying that gets bandied about a lot. It goes, "Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." The logic behind this saying is pretty simple. People in the past touched the stove and got burned. This means that if you touch the stove, you will get burned. Consequently, learn from the past and don't touch the stove. Of course, things are never quite that simple. People disagree about what's a stove and what's a cookie jar. Some people think that touching the stove was actually a good idea. History is complicated. These cases present another source of complication. A person can learn too much from history. All three of these very wealthy and powerful people trusted so much in the patterns that had gotten them so far that they made really terrible decisions and were pretty badly burned. These aren't even the only examples of this happening, even in very recent memory. I was able to take Crimea easily in 2014, so taking Ukraine should be a piece of cake. Government bonds have always been a safe bet, so we should invest heavily in bonds. Thatcher cut taxes and won a ton of elections, so I should cut taxes too. The world is always changing. Things that work one time might not work later on. The past can be used to guide decision making, but its lessons need to be taken with a grain of salt. So perhaps there should be an addendum to the saying. Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and those who do nothing but try to repeat history are doomed.